That's not the point. The point of the architecture is for the people. That's what you get in architecture. You get to touch the lives of people and enrich and empower them in these beautiful spaces. Within the architectural project lies the answers, also all of the questions. So if you're designing things because of your ego, you are out of place. It's not about you. It's about that building, and it's about your client. Getting new projects from new clients is really hard to do. So we found at FFKR.
Hello, and welcome to the Studio Session podcast. I'm your host, Benjamin Varnell, and today I'm honored to have a special guest, Roger Jackson. Roger Jackson is a fellow in the AIA and a LEEDap certified professional. He's collaborating right now as a principal at FFKR Architects, known as one of the largest architecture firms in Utah. Roger recently retired from full-time work after almost 40 years. He was recently a senior principal and had served for over 7 years as the president of the company from 2013 to 2021. A native of Salt Lake City, he graduated from the University of Utah with a Master of Architecture in 1984. Jackson is a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. He has designed dozens of buildings throughout the U.S. He specializes in religious and historical restoration architecture and has been entrusted with designing many significant sacred projects for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, including temples in Vernal, Utah, Nauvoo, Illinois, Hawaii, Kansas City, Missouri, Brigham City, Utah, Hartford, Connecticut, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Tucson, Arizona, Pocatello, Idaho, and the Provo City Center Temple and the renovation of the historic temple in Salt Lake City. Roger is known for his remarkable sketching, freehand drawing talent, and his intelligent, respectful management style, and has a living interest in people from all walks of life. What are the key moments that we need to understand about you, Roger, so that we can understand your journey in life?
Well, I was homegrown here in Salt Lake City, Utah. I decided early that I wanted to be a civil engineer and did a year of civil engineering. Then I quit school for a couple years and served in Korea as a missionary, which is customary for young men in my faith to serve as a missionary. I returned and had decided to go into architecture school. And so I know people who've been dreaming about being an architect since they were 4 years old. But for me, it came later. I was 21, I guess, and decided to go into architecture. My father was an architect, and people want to get romantic about that, but it didn't stick with any of my siblings. I wanted to do it, and I worked hard in school, enjoyed it, but boy, was I glad it was done. Just days before graduation, I had a note from a professor that said, "Hey, call Ray Kingston at FFKR. He's looking for help." And so I went down and interviewed a couple of times, had a couple interviews. So I started working just days before graduation even. And I've spent my whole career there. I retired officially at 39 and a half years. And that's been a year and a half ago. So now I'm at 41. And I'm still working a little bit. I go into the office a day a week and help out on various projects. And so that's sort of my journey to architecture. I did have one project that sort of changed my life and sent me in a certain direction. I was in way over my head, but assigned to be the project architect for the remodel of the Hotel Utah building in downtown Salt Lake City. That's this building. It's a really beautiful building. I was the project architect over the whole thing, and then we had divided the project into several parts, and many of those parts had senior architects who were more senior than I, being sort of the project architect for that part. My job was just directing traffic and trying to keep the client happy. I spent 6.5 years on that project. It was all about a historic building and what does the historic building need to be and what does it need to look like. Through the years, it had been changed and remodeled, and things had been taken off, and weird stuff had been put on. Our task was to clean it up and make it look right. So I learned to love, honor, and respect and listen to the historic buildings, that they had a tale to tell, and we could let them take the lead. That also connected me with big adaptive reuse projects, historic buildings, also connected me with the client, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who owned the building and had for years. And so all of my subsequent career projects, I could trace back to that project that just set me on a path of old buildings working with this client, which then turned into new buildings with the same client.
Today, we're going to take a deep dive into your experience in leading FFKR and your experience in what you have described as a client keeper. Could you describe what you meant by a client keeper?
Well, there's people in the office that do the work, and it's people who get the work, and it's not always the same person. So as a client keeper, that's a phrase that we came up with as the person who keeps the relationship with the client going. So you're involved in getting the job and then keeping the client happy, making sure that the work is being done and that the client stays happy all the way along. And so it became my role to be the person who keeps our client happy.
That's such an important role, and that's why I think it's critical for someone of your experience to share your knowledge so that we can all grow as architects. And that's what I'm excited to talk about today.
It's really important. Getting new projects from new clients is really hard to do. Mm-hmm. And so we found at FFKR, most of our work comes from repeat clients. The process of finding out about a project and trying to find who the stakeholders are and responding to the RFP and putting out a proposal and all that it's a big expense and a lot of work. But when you can do a good job for a client and they call you up and say, hey, I have this other project I want you to do, you can save a lot of effort and heartache and money for the company if you can keep your clients happy and they want to use you again.
So you described that you didn't want to look into architecture as a career until you were 21, although your dad, your father, was an architect. What was something that drew you back to architecture?
I really don't know what prompted it. Strangely, I remember the time and place when I actually told somebody. It was right before I was finishing my missionary service, and someone had asked me, so what are you going to do when you get done and when you go home? I remember saying, I'm thinking about going to architecture school. And then thinking, wow, where did that come from? Because I don't remember the conscious thought of, yeah, I'm going to do this. Said it first, and then, yeah, that rang true and seemed right. I came home in the summertime, and that fall I registered for school and started in the architecture program.
So one of my decisions to study architecture came on my mission as well. It was because I visited a temple, and I was really amazed with all the detail that went into creating a temple. And I figured that if I was to dedicate my career to something, it would be to creating something that meant something to me in the end. And that's why I've been pursuing architecture, as well as the beauty that I found in that temple. I've always wanted to learn how to recreate that.
Yeah, that's great.
Early on, when I heard about your work, as well as your dedication to classical and traditional arts in the world of architecture, was when I was studying at school at Utah Valley University, which is a classical and traditional based school. And they used Beaux-Art methods to teach. And you actually reviewed my capstone projects. It was a wonderful honor to have you there. And you have dedicated a lot of time to going up to UVU to review students' work. And what drew your interest to UVU, and how has that relationship developed for you?
I support the notion of the program teaching traditional and classical design style. I went to a very modernist school at the University of Utah. Then it was called the Graduate School of Architecture. Got a master's degree in architecture. And, we took architectural history courses in a big auditorium, the professor clicking through slides, because that was the technology, right?
Yeah.
Looking through slides and lecturing, but then it was never talked about again. So none of our studio classes ever referred back to the history. It was just the history, and then our studio was all very, I guess the word hardcore modernism. One of my professors, and the professor I had the most, had worked for years in the office of Mies van der Rohe, and he was a devoted disciple of van der Rohe. And so all of the projects that came out of his studios kind of had to look like the Seagram building in some fashion or other. He taught a high-rise studio, and everybody's high-rise looked all the same and looked like variations on the theme of the Seagram building. But mine was different, and he gave me a B. He punished me with a B.
Darn.
Which I wore as a badge. I didn't like the fact that he was force-feeding everybody Mies van der Rohe. But I came through the historic building route into classical and traditional architecture. From the Hotel Utah remodel, the Joseph Smith Memorial Building, the next project we did was the Vernal Utah Temple, again for the LDS Church. And we studied the historic building and tried to make sure that everything we did was compatible with that historic building. And as a precedent, we used that building for everything. From that building, we did the temple in Nauvoo, Illinois, which, if you know the story, the early Mormon saints built this beautiful big building on the wild frontier. This was Western Illinois, which was kind of the edge of the known world, almost. They built this grand building. Well, religious bigotry and persecution drove the Mormon pioneers out of that city in February of 1846. In 1848, the building burned down, but it was a stone building, so the tower, the roof, all the floors, everything burned and fell into this stone box that was the stone building. And then in 1850, a tornado came through and blew down the other three walls and left one wall standing. The wall standing is that picture. And that stayed for about 15 or 16 years. And then it was finally scavenged to build other buildings in the county. And then there was another religious group that purchased the site, and they used a lot of the stone in their buildings. When the LDS Church repurchased the site, the land, they tore those buildings down and saved most of the stone over in a big field. Fast forward to 1999, LDS Church decided to rebuild that building. And we were perfectly ready and available. We ended up rebuilding the building with just the least amount of information you can imagine. We had access to the original drawings, and we had access to a couple of fuzzy old photos, including this one. And then we had to recreate it. And if it wasn't on the few drawings, we had to guess what they would have done. The architect was a church member, William Weeks. And the stories are that he and Joseph Smith, the church president and founder, talked a lot about the design of the temple, but we know they would have used some of the moldings and the details from Asher Benjamin's pattern book. And so we studied all of those and we created this building that got built and dedicated, and it's much loved. There are people, friends in my neighborhood, just on a whim, drove back there, which takes a couple of days, just to see the temple. And that by then, here's like 3 old buildings in a row in my career. And so they just kept talking to me. It kept singing that this is where I need to be. And then the old building and the temple combination came in. Well, the project received a prestigious award from Traditional Building Magazine, the Palladio Award in 2003. So we went back to the Traditional Building Conference in Baltimore and to receive the award. And I gave a presentation, received this lovely award, and I went through the trade show exhibit and found the table for the Institute of Classical Art and met Christine Frank there, who was really super helpful, and it totally expanded my brain to know that there were people who knew this stuff and could teach it and study it. People were writing books about this. I had no idea. I thought that Steve Goodwin, my business partner at FFKR, I thought Steve and I were blazing new ground and inventing new things and recovering this ancient technology. I don't know where I was, but well, I do. I was in Salt Lake City, but I had no idea that this kind of thing was out there. And so I joined the Institute of Classical Art. I'm actually in the ICAA member number 57. And now there's, tens of thousands of members. But here's this group teaches this stuff and could teach me what the treatises are and teach me all of these things that I've been sort of struggling on my own and just mimicking what I found in the old buildings. And so by then I was hooked. And this new traditional and new classical architecture became kind of my thing because it's so beautiful and so easy to enjoy. There's beautiful architecture that is very modern, but I think it's a learned response. And you might see it and think, oh, that's cool, or wow, or yeah, that's cool. But you see traditional architecture and you can think, oh, that's beautiful. I love that. That's really beautiful. And I want to go for that. I want that response. I don't want the, oh, cool, or oh, how imaginative you are. I want the, oh boy, that's beautiful.
Early in your career, how did your hand drawing skills become an asset to communicate that story as well as build the foundation of skills to communicate with clients?
I think it's hard for people today to understand it, but hand drawing was all we had. Now people look at hand drawing as a novelty, but it's all we had. So everybody knew how to draft. You had to know how to hand draft. I spent the first many years of my working life drafting, hunched over a table, drafting. It was the tool for me to express ideas and solve problems. We call them a design problem. It's not really a problem. It's just a situation. And maybe it's the arrangement of a couple of rooms and how to get the doors to swing and the hallway between them. The means to solve that for me was to sketch an option.
Mhm.
And then you look at it. Oh, I can fix that. And then with tracing paper, sketch over the top of that. And then, oh, I can fix that with tracing paper. So you might at the end have 5 or 6 ideas going. And in the end, then you'd say, I like this part of this one and this part of this one. You draw it again. You have to not be shy about using the paper.
Right.
And you just draw it. And that was the tool to solve the problem and then express the solution to my boss or a client. During that same Hotel Utah remodel project, our office started with computer drafting. By then, I was the project architect writing memos, typing memos and letters on a really crappy little personal computer, maybe the first one ever. So me learning the computer drafting software was not the highest and best use of my time because I'm busy taking care of my client. I could get somebody else. I could hire somebody to do the drafting work. I never really learned AutoCAD and subsequent to that Revit. I did learn a little bit of SketchUp. The people who did it more than I became much better at it, much quicker. So in that time, I kept just drawing. People look today and say, oh, your drawings are amazing. Wow, how do you do that? It's because that's the only skill I got, practically. That just drawing with the pencil is the way I can express what I'm thinking. What I can express the architecture, but I know that's not the final answer because then it has to be put into the design and drafting software of AutoCAD or Revit to get it actually built. And so by myself, I can make a lovely drawing, but I can't get anything built. So I need the resources of others who have that skill, who may not have mine, but have that skill and can get things done. There's a link between your head and your heart and your hand. I know people who will be struggling with a design problem in Revit and they'll have to step back to AutoCAD because they can think in AutoCAD. And they'll figure it out in AutoCAD just like I would with a pen and a piece of paper. And then they'll go back into the Revit model and fix it. So some of that is romantic and mystical, but it also might be generational, that this is what I do. There are other people who work other ways.
Do you feel like at any point with your ability to draw with a pencil won your client over?
Almost all the time. I would go in meetings and I have a basic pad of lined paper, right? Mm-hmm. I'm talking about something and pretty quickly I had a picture in my head and I could draw it. And then I can say, oh, you mean like this? And they'll, oh, yes, that's it. Yeah, just like that.
Right.
It is a quick way, rather than say, we'll go study that and we'll bring that back next week. Mm-hmm. On the spot, on the fly, I could get an answer to the question. I can also draw most things upside down. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm across the table from a client, I can draw what we're talking about upside down so they can see it. Sometimes I get myself confused, but I can usually draw upside down, which is a great parlor trick and absolutely blows people away. I cannot write upside down, nor with my left hand. I know people who can write upside down, but I can't. But it's the way to communicate. Mm-hmm. And I've had the same kind of experience on the whiteboard, where we'll be sketching something on the whiteboard and I could draw it and people will say, yes, that's it. And then everybody takes out their phone, click, click, click. And then it's immortalized and off we go.
Can you recall a particular project where advice from your mentors was crucial in understanding how to earn trust in clients?
Yeah. I tell the story all the time. When we were working on the Joseph Smith Memorial Building there, remodel of the Hotel Utah, I would take these little design questions, little design problems to my boss, Joe Rubin, the R of FFKR. Joe, I can't figure this out. He'd look at it. Well, I don't even know what the problem is. Why don't you go back and figure out what the problem is and then come up with a couple of answers and then bring it back? Like, come on, I just need some help. We're busy here.
Right.
I would go back and study it out and come up with a couple of answers. And I'd come back and say, okay, here's the problem. Here's a couple of solutions. I like this one the best. And he'd say, yeah, I agree. So I did that 2 times. And after that, I said, I can solve these myself. He just taught me how to answer my own questions and to leave him alone. So I just started doing that. I didn't go back to him for a lot anymore because I knew how to answer my own questions. I tell that story to people all the time to encourage you because you're smart. You can figure this out, but you have to understand what is the problem. You can come up with a couple of ideas and you know which one of those is the best. You have a feel of what is going to be the best solution. And you're smart enough, you can figure this out. So I tell that to people all the time. You can figure this out. I'm happy to help you all I can. But stuff like this, you can figure out. In the meantime, Joe Rubin gets sick. He gets liver cancer and passes away before we finish the project. But by then, I was ready to take over because he had either intentionally or unintentionally taught me how to take care of it.
He gave the confidence to you to enable what you already could do.
Yeah. And he picked my answer every time. Maybe they weren't the best ideas, but he was giving me the confidence to make it happen. So I stopped asking him. I knew how to find the right answer.
You followed your father, Richard W. Jackson, into architecture. What was a specific lesson or insight he instilled in you?
When I first started in architecture at a job, we had these blueprint machines. It was called a diazo print, and you would take the drawing that you drew and you put it over this piece of yellow paper and put the 2 of them into this big machine that would roll them out and take the drawing that you drew, and it would come out the back, and the yellow piece that had the light on it, and you'd have to put that back in, and then out would come this white paper with blue lines. Before my time, it used to be blue paper with white lines, if you remember seeing the old blueprints. The developer for that was ammonia. Mm-hmm. And it stunk like ammonia. It was bad. So in my dad's office as a kid, it was right across from the library, 3rd East. We would park in the back. I would hyperventilate in the parking lot because we would go through the back door and it smelled so bad of ammonia. I'd have to sprint through that room to get back into the office where it didn't smell as bad. My memory as a little kid was that my dad's office always smelled like that nasty ammonia. So that I think is the reason all of my siblings stayed out of architecture. When I announced to my parents that I was going to architecture school, my dad shook his head like, oh boy, you better make sure you want to do this. And honestly, he never gave me a stitch of advice or any help ever. I think in the end, when I'm a new working professional, I've worked on some buildings, like I was able to take my parents to go to the Vernal Temple. And of course, I went through the Joseph Smith Memorial Building, and we went to the Nauvoo Temple with my parents. I know he was happy and proud of me because he said so. But in architecture school, I once asked him a question and he'd say, "Nope, this is on you. You have to want this." Architecture was good to him. I think he enjoyed it, but it was hard. It did not pay well. He worked a lot of bad hours and it was hard. And he wanted to make sure this was entirely my decision and that he stayed out of it so that I couldn't blame him for my terrible life. Which sounds harsh, but I came to appreciate his perspective. Honestly, architecturally, I know the work he did. I know some of his projects, but he had almost no influence on my career at all. He refused because he wanted to make sure it was my decision.
Would you do the same thing for your child if they went into architecture?
I would make sure they understood what they were in for. It is a hard profession. We have so much responsibility. We're highly respected, but we have so much responsibility. We have so much nasty schooling. Our licensing exam is hard. The internship is grueling, and you don't get the money. We do not get paid what we think we ought to. And you just have to know that. You're doing architecture because you love architecture. You're not doing it because of a good career move. You do architecture because you love architecture. I tell that to people all the time. You're not doing this to make money. Now, as a senior principal in a big firm, you can make decent money, but all your business school buddies and all your law school buddies, they're going to be making way more and working less than you pretty quickly. Architecture has a tremendous impact on people. You can make a beautiful space that can change and impact people's lives. The temple building you went into as a young man changed the direction of your life. This beautiful place made a difference in you. And you can do that as an architect. It's about the people. I really don't like the official architectural photography. It's a big space and they want to get everything in focus. So you have to have a very small aperture and a very long exposure time. If you have people in the picture, it will be blurry. So you take architectural photography on Sundays or some other day when people are not there. But that's a lie because the point of the architecture is for the people. So the best photos of the space are when it's full of people. We did a building. It was a school building, a big remodel for Viewmont High School up in Centerville. And it had in the middle of it this big windswept plaza with one dead tree in it. The district said, let's cover it over and make a big student commons. And so we got the job. We put this beautiful space frame, curved top space frame over it, and it tore off the building walls around it, opened up the corridors so people could look down into this space, and had some stairs and lots of terrace levels, places for people to hang out, people to talk. It's adjacent to the lunchroom, so you could bring your lunch out into this space. It was a really great space. Once it was opened, it was full of people every time I saw it. The photography we have of that space shows all the people in it, and it's the best snapshot we could take. It shows all the people in it, and yeah, they're a little fuzzy, but what that did is it changed the culture of the school. They used to have all the little cliques that would hang out in their halls, and sometimes the kids from other cliques wouldn't dare walk down that hall. You had the auto shop guys, the seminary queens, the cheerleaders, the jocks, the nerds, the Yu-Gi-Oh kids, and all of these groups just would not intermix. Well, now all of a sudden we had this space, and they could all be there together. It changed the culture of the school. The principal was so happy for us. But it was all about this space that transformed the school and became really an important part of the culture of the school and important part of the people's experience. And architecture can do that. That's what you get to do in architecture. You get to make these spaces that can have an impact on people. You can do a religious space, you can do a business space, you can do recreational sports. I'm working for our office on a casino building, and we're trying to make it as nice as we can, as beautiful as we can, to keep people happy, to meet the needs of our client who's paying us money, meet the needs of the client, meet the needs of his clients as they come to this building. It's really a privilege and a blessing to be able to impact people's lives like that. And I'm not even talking about the place where you live.
Right.
You know, that's a whole nother realm of building, of home building. Imagine the impact the builder of your home has on you.
Yeah. Whoever designed the shower across the hall from the living room, not a good idea.
All right. In architecture, you get to make these kinds of spaces, sometimes big outdoor spaces. We've all been to big outdoor places that are really beautiful, and they get more fun and more interesting when there's more and more people. So that's what you get in architecture. You get to touch the lives of people and enrich and empower them in these beautiful spaces.
That's really insightful. What standards or maxims did you emphasize to guide FFKR's success early on, and how did they play out in practice in your team?
FFKR is often this multi-headed beast, and everybody is going in their own direction. All the different principals have their different clients and are doing their things, and how they work and what they do is really up to them. Occasionally with bigger clients, bigger projects, a couple of principals will be together and sort of work together in the same sort of methodology and philosophy. We went after a project. I don't know the date of it. It had to have been around 1997 or 8 or 9. It's a project we did not get. Another local architecture firm got it and did a lovely job on it. But for that, we had to develop a design philosophy. As part of the RFP, as part of our proposal, they asked for a design philosophy. And we didn't actually have one firm-wide philosophy because all of our partners are doing their thing. But we did have the tagline, simple, elegant, and affordable, which with a little work you can turn into firmness, commodity, and delight, right? From Vitruvius.
Right.
But it was simple, elegant, affordable. So we had to come up with the philosophy, and I'm kind of a pack rat, and so I'd been saving interesting articles about architecture and famous quotes by architects, and so I sort of started walking through them, and I wrote a design philosophy that I modified through the years. The version I look at and have today was last modified in 2010. It was finished in 2001. So that's how old this design philosophy is, but it still holds true. To me, it's been something that I've thought of and worked off of my whole career, that within the problem, there's that word again, within the architectural project lies the answers. Also all of the questions. So whether it's the sun orientation, the prevailing winds, the topography of the site, the client's needs, the city, the local building community and building culture, everything is there and can give you the answer for an architecture that is specific to circumstances. And one of those big circumstances is, what does your client want? We've done in our office a lot of repeat work of retail projects. You know, we've done like 50 Maverick convenience stores. We did 300 grocery stores, 80s and 90s, all over the country. And sometimes they're the same store with a different site adaptation, but everything is different. The client wants the stores to be the same. but the site is different. So you have to change things, but keep them the same. You could have a client that wants an auto dealership here in this community that looks kind of like this. Or you might want to do a Toyota dealership here, and then Toyota mothership tells you what it has to look like, right? So inside the problem are the answers that you need for what is the architecture. Another tenet of my personal philosophy is that if you're touching an old building, you better not mess it up. You need to be sympathetic to that building, because there's so many buildings out there which start with a nice building and then it gets this carbuncle on it of something completely different. Mm-hmm. And then another addition is something completely different. So if you're designing things because of your ego, you are out of place. It's not about you. It's about that building, and it's about your client. So if you touch an old building, you better be really careful with it, because people love old buildings. Alberti said the best way to keep and save old buildings is to make them beautiful to start with. And then the people will love them. And the marauding Babylonians will not destroy them. Mm-hmm. They'll preserve these heritage buildings. And you make a beautiful building, and you respect and honor that building with whatever you do to it. A time when that really rung true to me was a project I did for Davis County School District. It was an addition to an elementary school. The district had, I think, 9 or 10 of them that were identical, only just a different colored brick. And so rather than we had to add on a couple of classrooms, did some interior remodel, but added on 4 or 5 classrooms. And we took the tack of saying, the original architect, they're designing this building. So we changed things. He had one small window in each end of the classroom, 1 and 1. And what we did is we did 2 and 2 to double the amount of window space in each classroom. And we matched the brick, we matched the finishes, we matched everything. So we gave the school community this more noble building with good classrooms that just matched and fit with the old building. And we didn't give them a thing with a thing on it, you know. And it was just this little school building in Davis County where we practiced that maxim, and it really rang true and made a beautiful building. But that was the same lesson I learned when we did the Joseph Smith Memorial Building and the Vernal Temple. And the Nauvoo Temple is you've got to respect the existing building. We've done other projects like that. We did the Provo City Center Temple. It was a beautiful building designed by William Folsom. Mm-hmm. Burned out, left the masonry shell. We did a lot of work inside. That's another 2-hour story. But we tried to say, what would William Folsom do? Mm-hmm. If he was doing then what we're doing now, what would he have done? What details would he have used? What kinds of feelings and expression? So we studied other projects of his, and we studied other architecture of the time and the appropriate style from wherever it was in the country to see what would he have done. And we want him to be the hero here. Yeah. It's not about me and our team. It's about him and the vision and the look that he gave that building. And that's what we did. We let William Folsom be the hero.
You showed a deep respect for precedent, and that's one of your maxims, as well as you took down your own ego and said, this architect is the one in charge, and let the building teach you.
Yeah, let the building teach us and express what the addition needs to be. Another good example of that is the Hotel Utah building, the Joseph Smith building. In 1976, so FFKR was founded by 4 architects. Number 1 and number 4 were partners, and 2 and 3 came over. They formed this firm. Well, 1 and 4 did a project at the Hotel Utah where they added on to the back of the building. And if you look carefully, you can see the difference in the materials from the original building to the addition in 1976, and where they followed exactly what I say to do is you keep it consistent with the historic building. Now, you get into trouble with our historic tax credits and the Secretary of the Interior standards because they say the addition has to be of its time and cannot be and ought not to be an exact match of the original building. I disagree with that. I did a second-story addition on my home, and I tried to make it look as if it was originally a 2-story building. Mm-hmm. It's a craftsman-style shingle bungalow. There's a million of them across the country, and there's a million good examples of 2-story craftsman bungalows. I studied a lot of them and tried to make my house look exactly like a 2-story building. And Preservation Utah did a home tour in my neighborhood on my very street and would not come in my house because I did not follow the Secretary of the Interior standards. Because I made the addition, I wanted it to look like it was the original house all along, which is what I really believe you can do. And who am I fooling? It's not some great architectural fraud. Who's the injured party here? Well, nobody. You get a home that looks good. My work has mostly been adaptive reuse. Mm-hmm. Take this building and turn it into this. I've done that with a couple of temple buildings and the Joseph Smith Memorial Building. Turn it into this.
Which is a great sustainability technique.
You know, the greenest building is the one that's already standing. And the idea that you build a beautiful, noble building and it can have multiple lives.
Your work shows a deep respect for history and precedent. Can you walk us through your process of researching precedents and creating a vision for our projects that keeps everybody on your team on track?
Yeah, it's a lot of it is site visits and context. It's hard to understand entirely the building culture unless you're really like in it. In Hartford, Connecticut, our team spent a day driving all around town and all around the neighboring towns to find examples of the kinds of things we were looking for. So that we wanted people to think, oh, this building really belongs here. We did the same thing in Philadelphia. We spent a day with our team walking around, especially right adjacent to it are several really fine buildings that we wanted to make sure that this building felt like it belonged here. And so you study all of the neighboring buildings, you study the community and the culture as much as you can understand in a couple of days trip. This is the way they build and what things look like. This is the materials they use. You got to use the right materials or it just won't fit. So there's the building culture, then also the kind of design and style. The Provo City Center Temple is this kind of East Lake Victorian high Gothic revival mix. So we tried to study those kinds of time periods. We studied concurrent buildings designed by the same architect. We found examples that exactly fit the look and time in Connecticut. Interestingly, Mark Twain's home in Hartford, Connecticut was a big precedent piece for things inside the Provo City Center Temple. It's the right time, the right style, the right materials. So you can find precedent everywhere. It doesn't have to just be the 4 buildings around a building. You can find the precedent that fits with the style and the design and the building culture, the community, and the history. All of those things have to all be in your head as you pick up your pencil and start drawing. Then you can think, oh, this is like that. Oh, this is like that. I want this to be kind of like that. And even having those pictures in front of you to say, no, I want it to look like that. Because I have no shame in people seeing a new building and thinking, oh, that's like that other one downtown. That's like such and such a building downtown. I think that's good. That makes it meaningful and relevant. When we submitted the drawings for the Hartford, Connecticut Temple, we built in the little town of Farmington. We submitted the drawings, and the guy and the plan review people turned to us and said, how did you guys back out west, where the states are square, design a building that so perfectly fits our community? Well, I'll tell you why. We bought about 20 books about colonial architecture. We spent 3 days stomping around your town. We've studied everything we can. The church's project manager, his boss, had grown up back east. And so this kind of colonial architecture was ingrained in them. That's how we did it, is we did all kinds of homework. Happy coincidence. Ken Sanders Bookstore downtown had a series of 8 books about colonial architecture all up and down the eastern seaboard. When we're starting to design, I go in there looking for books and not too hopeful. And here's a series of 8 books on colonial architecture. So I bought them all, and then we just studied them all. And yes, like this. Yes, like that. This is what I want. And all of that is in your head as you're designing. And it starts with a rough sketch. Then research, then go look for it to find more on the details. Go find more of the details. But it starts with your sketch in your head.
When I present my work to my boss, the first thing he does is asks, okay, what are you looking at for?
Yeah, where did that come from?
Yeah, where did that come from? What inspired this idea? And I love that process. It's such a iterative as well as informed process.
And that's the beauty of precedent-based design. And I've had to learn that on my own. I did not learn that in school, except for this one class from John Stockton where everything had to look like the Secord building, remember? So that's the precedent. Everything had to be like that. But I think he missed the point of precedent-based design. There's so much more. There's so many parts to it. And it can be an element that feels right, that you can find from any source everywhere.
There really isn't any original architecture. It's all inspired by something.
I really believe that. And I think of, people complain about classical and traditional architecture as being just copying other things. But it's rarely a solid copy. It's adapting the orders and the tradition and the precedent design. It's adapting it. But I think a lesson in precedent-based design would be helpful for all of our modernist friends, because there is good work and beautiful architecture that really should be copied and done well. And I think modernism could use a lesson in precedent-based design. Okay, make it a modern building, but make it a really good one. Mm-hmm. Seek out the best examples of what you're trying to do and mimic those to make it the best it can be.
Those are really good insights. You were awarded the Bybee Prize for distinguished use of stone. What lessons have you learned in working in stone, and can you give an example from a project?
The stone is beautiful just to start with. And I've been lucky to be able to work on these temple projects for the LDS Church, where they want to use these beautiful, noble materials. I did a project, East High School, here in Salt Lake City, and the school community wanted it made out of brick. Mm-hmm. But the budget was not brick friendly because it's expensive. Right. And the contractor, to keep us focused on the brick, kept saying, well, we could just do this out of EFS, a fake stucco. The school community would say, no, we have to have the brick. They were willing to make sacrifices in other places to be able to afford the brick that was important to the school community. I think the LDS Church does similar in saying that these buildings have to be noble, enduring, and endearing, actually. But they like to use these noble materials. We've been fortunate and blessed to get that kind of experience working on these projects. The church also likes to use precast concrete, which I've done on a couple of projects, and they're beautiful. It's still a beautiful material, but it's a more noble material. The alternative is brick, which could be nice on a temple building. And then the next step down is this drive it fake stucco or metal panels or something. So it's really a function of the client being willing to spend the money to get these beautiful, noble materials. The temple in Philadelphia was supposed to be another stone. It was quarried in China. It's a beautiful stone, kind of a creamy beige tan color. It's a really lovely stone. And all of a sudden, the Chinese government shut down the quarry. So we had to find another stone that had that same price point because the stone is expensive. And we found one. It was this kind of a brown, not a brown stone, but a brown granite. I didn't like it much, but it met the price point. That was the decision. Fortunately for us, it didn't meet all of the strength requirements. So we had to look again. And then we found this stone from a place in Maine. And it was a little more expensive, but then the church said they were willing to pay for the money and get the additional appropriations because it really was a beautiful stone. And so it was all the fabrication work was done in Quebec. So we went up to the fabricator, and in this giant warehouse, they had laid out, it's called the dry lay. Mm-hmm. They had just laid out all the pieces in approximately the right order with not a little mortar joint between them, but a couple inches so you wouldn't bang the corners. But so here's this whole part, a third of the building laid out. And it was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. And they put me on the genie lift way up in the rafters of this giant warehouse so I could get as far away as possible to see this stone. And then they brought in a hose, squirted it all down. The light gray granite, when it's wet, goes darker. And it was even beautiful when it was wet. And I got kind of choked up. I started to get emotional about just how beautiful this stone was going to be. And that building stone is just really, really lovely.
It is a beautiful project. I commend you for your respect of the materials that you use on buildings. It's a way to portray an honest architecture.
And people love it. You know, the common person, the regular person, they love to see these stone buildings, and you watch them. They go up and touch them.
Yeah.
People will go up and touch these kinds of buildings that have beautiful materials. They're not going to go up and touch some ugly stucco building.
In your work on the Philadelphia Temple, did you use a precedent book to inspire the proportions of the classical elements on the building?
I used the work of William Ware and the American Mignola. I think of all the treatises, it is the easiest numbering system to remember. I can actually remember it, and it's easy to use and manipulate. It's also a little bit boring. I think you can set the bones with William Ware and then enhance it with studying some of the other published treatises. We also had some very good examples right there in the city. Right across the street from the temple is the Family Courts building, with a copy of the Free Library building, which is right next to that. So here in the city are, and you can see in the photo, 3 of these beautiful Corinthian classical buildings. Across the freeway, the other way, is the Cathedral's Church of Saints Peter and Paul, the headquarters of the Catholic Diocese in Philadelphia. It's made of brown stone, but also a Corinthian classical building. So it sort of had to be that with all of these distinguished neighbors. So, but we spend a lot of time walking around Philadelphia thinking, what is the look here? What is the right aesthetic? What is the character that this building has to have to feel compatible in the city? Our goal was, really has to be recognizable as an LDS temple. Our goal was to make sure that it felt like it belonged in the city. Funny story. One of my business partners was back in Philadelphia with his wife, and they got on one of those hop-on, hop-off tourist buses, and they're driving around the city, and they get to the temple, and my friend knew what it was. He asked the tour guide, "What's that building?" The guy said, "Well, I don't know exactly. It's one of these old buildings that they're cleaning up. They're washing the building and cleaning it up." I heard that story and I thought, yes, yes, that's exactly what we wanted. We wanted it to feel like it belonged in the city.
Considering that the building is so respectful to the classical as well as the surrounding buildings, it has probably some real complexity in how all the pieces fit together. What principles did you have to learn about applying stone to these temples?
It was really interesting because we had the general contractor on board while we were preparing the documents. We used a local Philadelphia structural engineer, and the way we had visualized how to build the building, the structural engineer said, "Yeah, we can do that, but that's not the way they like to build it here." So that building is not like a concrete building with the stone attached. It's a block building, CMU. Philadelphia is a brick town. These guys lay bricks, and they wanted to lay blocks. So that building is a concrete structure, concrete floors. The exterior walls are fully grouted 12-inch CMU blocks because that's the way we build it here. The engineer who knew how to do this, because he lives and works there, then figured out the attachment system to attach to the concrete block. That's part of the idea of specific to circumstances. In Philadelphia, this is what you do. The big Corinthian capitals are about 5 feet tall and they weigh 5,600 pounds.
Wow. That's amazing. Who ended up carving those stones?
The stone was quarried in Maine. The fabricator was a company called Lacroix in just outside of Montreal. They hired another company to do all the carving work. So they did the work and then shipped it down to Philadelphia.
On the Capitol building, you probably experienced something differently. You're using a lot larger blocks.
The state office buildings, Richard Cledding designed the state capitol building, dedicated, finished in 1914, I think. But their original master plan showed 3 other buildings making a central quad. Well, the state had long ago built the state office building, a very modern building built in the early 60s, which didn't function well and uniformly hated. Our task was to build the east and west office buildings. They had to be big enough that everybody in the Capitol building could go into them while they did the Capitol repair work, and then half of them would come back in the Capitol and half would stay. So it had to be bigger, just barely big enough for that, which would make them extra big for the future. But those buildings are steel frame building, but the stone subcontractor was on board, and they like to panelize buildings. So they will build the stone panels in their shop, attach them to these strong back steel frames, and then truck them up there and pick them up and stick them on the building. They are also doing the north building now that's under construction. VCBO has designed that building, they also did the Nauvoo Temple that way. Every stone was set in the shop, out of the weather, on these steel frames, trucked out there, picked up and set on the building. It's really ingenious and works really well.
How thick was the stone on that building?
State Capitol office buildings, the state capitol has this kind of pillowed, big, heavy stones at the base course. And so we wanted that look. And so those stones are probably 8 or 9 inches thick. So where we could, we skinnied down the stone to pay for only the little skinny, like 2-inch stuff. If you look at those state capitol office buildings closely, you'll see that some things on there aren't exactly classical. We had to sneak a bunch of stuff in there to make them affordable. Again, we only had a budget. The more you study those buildings, you can see that some of these corners look like contemporary office buildings because they're thin stone veneer panels as opposed to heavier cubic stones.
Very interesting.
But
You have emphasized that architecture is hard work. Can you describe a specific experience that solidified for you the value of hard work, and what advice would you give to the next generation about embracing it?
well, it is hard work. It takes a lot of, the education and the training, but it takes a lot of brain power to think this stuff through, to think through the adjacencies and the relationships of spaces, and to think through the volumes. You draw a simple floor plan and you have to think through the three-dimensional expression of the box that you drew as a room on the floor plan. And it takes a lot of time to do the work, design it, and properly document it. It takes a lot of time. And then the construction could easily take 6 years or more for a really big building. Usually it's like 1 or 2. But 1 or 2 years, your business school friends, if they have a project that lasts 3 months, they think they're going to die. It's not uncommon to have a project that will last 2 or 3 or more years. I've been on one project 6.5 years. I'm on another project, Salt Lake Temple, which is going to be longer.
Right.
It takes hard work, and you just have to do the work, or the drawings aren't correct and it won't get built right, and you'll have to do twice the work later. Advice I would give to people is that you just have to work hard. People talk a lot about the work-life balance.
Right.
They mostly talk about that in terms of the life part of that equation and not the work part. Because it takes work. And I've wondered through my life if I've been out of balance. And I know there are times when I was out of balance towards the work side. I have always felt and had the confidence that I could eventually figure it out if I drew it enough times. And that's the value of the trace paper that we use, is that you can see what you're drawing over the top of. And you can see the different versions of this to draw it, assess it, modify it. This iterative process takes a while. And you just have to be willing to say, I'm going to spend the time to do this. And sometimes you don't have the time, so you get as best you can, as quick as you can. But you can get the answer.
What's one piece of advice you'd offer young architects searching for employment today, and what specific skill or talent do you believe is the most crucial for them to develop right now?
When I came out of architecture school in 1984, you needed the skill of drafting with a pencil. It's different today. You really need the skills of AutoCAD, SketchUp, and Revit. AutoCAD is fading away in most bigger commercial and institutional work. We still have clients that want everything in AutoCAD. So we have people who still remember AutoCAD. But most of the world is going to Revit. When people say they want to go to architecture school, I suggest they go to the community college and get the associate degree in architectural technology and learn AutoCAD and Revit. Because that's the skill that you need to have when you walk in the door. The soft skills you need are listening, the design sense, hard work, teachability. But the hard skills, you really need to know how to do Revit.
It seems like you've embraced a certain bedside manner as an architect to win clients. What advice would you give to people in winning clients in that way?
Honor and respect them. Often an institutional client, they have the financial responsibility to watch over the money. If you're working for an individual entrepreneur, it's their money. Then we ought to respect them because they're spending their hard-earned money on this building. We really have to honor and respect our clients because without them, we can do nothing. Sometimes our client might be a state agency. So we as taxpayers are the payers, though we might not be the exact user or the client. So you have to respect them and listen to them. You can have influence, but you have to listen to your client. That's really important, that they know that you're listening and that they can trust you, because they are entrusting us with their hard-earned money to build things. Sometimes people can be difficult, but you can win them over if they know that you have their best interest and you're doing the best you can and being respectful, careful with their money.
That is so insightful, and it's really good advice to anyone looking to win clients. Recently, you assumed the presidency of the ICAA in Utah. What's the key initiative or vision you have for engaging team and teaching members in the coming years, and why is that important to you?
Well, I really like the ICAA, and I was so happy to see that we have a chapter of our own in Utah. I was in the room when it was founded in 2012. I've been busy with work, and I've done things with the chapter ever since then. I was asked to take over the presidency of our chapter. In recent years, Paul Monson was the president of the chapter and also the director of the architecture program at UVU. Two big responsibilities, one way bigger than the other. And so in many ways, a lot of the chapter events got subsumed into UVU school program. And so one of my goals is to sort of untangle that and have the chapter be more specific to the chapter. We still support the school and the school student association, the Rising Vitruvians. Of course, we still support them because they are our chapter members too. My goal is to bring the center of gravity back to Salt Lake County, where there are more working professionals. I have the dream of an annual program that has an event for architecture, history, interior design, urbanism, craft, and art. That's in our name, you remember?
Yes.
So I want an event for these 6 things, and we're going to do 3 or 4 of them this year. But in the future, I want to have an event for all of these things that are part of this sort of ethic of classical and traditional architecture and planning. I want to keep that going, engage more members. I think a lot of members started to think that the ICAA had just morphed into the UVU program, and so they may have let their memberships lapse. And so I'm trying to reach out to people and saying, hey, we're having events here. Follow us on social media, learn about our events, and we're having events here in Salt Lake County. We're going to let the students drive up to Salt Lake County for our events, because the working professionals are going to be less likely to want to drive to Orem events there. So I say that not to disrespect Paul at all, because he's done a fabulous job and he did a good job keeping this thing alive. That was his intent in suggesting me to assume the presidency. My goal to strengthen the chapter, because I love the idea and the notion of continuing education and continuous learning. Even as a retired professional, there are things I want to learn and things I want to do. And I think we can learn things. And so you, as a young emerging professional, you can learn things that can help you throughout your 40-year career. And you can learn from my 40-year career looking back.
Yeah. I really appreciate you and your dedication to the ICAA. So to end the podcast, we have a tradition of asking a question to the next guest. Your question from the last interview was, will we see the Beaux-Arts style of teaching in drawing and sculpting come back into architectural education, or will the current tech-focused model of teaching remain the focus of education?
Traditional architecture has assumed the role today as the rebel alliance, right? We are the upstarts pushing against the megalith that is modernism today. In the schools that teach traditional and classical architecture, yes, those kinds of that educational methodology will continue and prevail, but it would only be a very enlightened and very progressive program that would allow an elective course in a regular modernist school to have that kind of thing happen. For the most part, it's going to be in the 4 schools that are teaching it today. And you're going to have to learn this on your own if you want to know it. You're not going to get it at your modernist architecture school.
What would your question be for the next guest?
You know, I'm just one person doing the best I can in the situation I'm in. Can I really make a difference?
Thank you so much for your insightful comments today and your experience, as well as the influence you've had on so many of us architects and your willingness to drive out to Orem and be a jury member or lecture and be a guiding hand in FFKR in your mentorship role. It has influenced me, and it'll influence everybody that listens to the podcast today.
Thank you.
Anybody listening, jump in on the conversation and share your experience in your career and what meaningful advice you'd have to match with this discussion about leadership, precedent study, and creating these noble buildings that we love. I hope that everybody's enjoyed it, and thank you again for this awesome honor for you to join me on this podcast. It means a lot to me.
Thank you. And thanks for asking me in.
For anyone listening that hasn't already, please like and subscribe the video and follow for more, because I will be posting more interviews like this. That's all for now.